Well, hello, here we are, day one on the Isle of Wight. As we travelled here today from East Cowes, which is where the ferry deposited us, having got on the ferry at Southampton, we took the short trip across, down the river, then across the Solent, not far, to East Cowes, and then we drove from East Cowes about 40 minutes via Newport and then to our destination here, which is on the west of the island. Now, as we were driving along, I was pleasantly surprised at how much of God's creation there is here. Is that a silly thing to say? How much of God's creation there is? Because of course God's creation is absolutely everywhere, isn't it? But I'll tell you what I mean. Let me read from Scripture first of all, because it tells us in the 3rd chapter of the letter to the Colossians, beginning at verse 1. So I have in front of me here Colossians chapter 3, and I'm going to read, just the first 2 or 3 verses really. Verse 1, if then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. Really, it's that verse 2 there, which is almost, we might say, a stand-alone verse. We could read verse 2 on its own and it would make perfect sense. There are some verses where that applies, maybe not so many of them, because as we know, we must read a verse in context and not just take one verse out of the pages of Scripture and apply it to anything and everything, because more often than not that will not be appropriate. It will be a distortion. It will distort the true meaning of Scripture. But here, Colossians chapter 3 verse 2, set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. 2 things really that come to mind there is, one, this is day 1 of the holiday to the Isle of Wight, a new place to visit, to explore. Who knows, we're here for a week and I'm not quite sure what we are going to do. It's all new, not a very big island. We'll see how things go, but there we are. It's all new, brand new. But really, let's keep our feet on the ground. Let me keep my feet on the ground. Set my mind on things above. That's what it says. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. But in setting my mind on things above, which is how that verse begins, I think of the creation. And as I said a minute or 2 ago, driving the 40 minutes from the port of East Cowes, there's so much of God's creation all around. The hills, they're not overly large, more undulations really, but there's so much greenery, so much countryside here. And in itself, an island. Islands can be quite fascinating because they come out of the sea. They came out of the sea all those, a few thousand years ago. Certainly not millions and billions of years ago, but undoubtedly, maybe I'm speculating a little bit, but probably because of the result of the Great Flood, which covered the earth, and there were movements of earth masses. Be that as it may, as we say, an island is there to explore, and an island is part of God's creation, because whether God created it as an island or whether it became an island as a result of God's work, it amounts to the same thing. God created the seas, God created the earth mass. And talking of the seas, we had a lovely crossing from Southampton to East Cowes across the water, I hadn't been on a ferry for a good many years, and I spent the whole journey of about an hour, not long, outside in the fresh air, looking at the Portsmouth on one side, and then on the west there was some beach huts, and it was just lovely. Some yachts were sailing. People were enjoying God's creation, and so was I, enjoying God's creation. I was setting my mind on things above, as well as the things on the earth. But the scripture says, set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. It doesn't mean that we're not meant to enjoy God's creation. It does not mean that we're not meant to admire the depths of the sea, the power of the sea, which caused the ferry sometimes to move a little bit, particularly when another ferry or ship passed in the opposite direction. There was movement on the ferry. The waters moved, and hence we moved. No, we admire these things and we wonder at these things. Just the vast oceans, the amount of water there is. Well, this is God's creation. We are meant to look at the trees which are here in front of us. And there are so many green trees on this island at the moment. We've had so much rain, haven't we, in the month of May in particular, and earlier in the spring. No, we see the things that are on the earth, the things that are below, but in doing so, we must acknowledge the Creator, and thereby, in acknowledging God as the Creator, we set our minds on the things above. As Christians, that's what we're called to do. So really, just a short message today, day one of the trip down here to the Isle of Wight. Colossians chapter 3 verse 2, that's really the verse, the key verse just for today. Based on the trip across the water and then on the land, driving here this afternoon, and how wonderful it was to experience just one small part of God's creation here on the Isle of Wight.